January 21st, 1943. 1847 hours. The fading light beneath the Guadalcanal canopy still clung to the branches like dying embers. 73 feet above the jungle floor, Sergeant Teeshi Yamamoto lay perfectly motionless inside the thick branches of a towering banyan tree. To anyone passing below, he would have appeared as nothing more than a knot of bark and leaves. But behind a curtain of shadows, his trained eyes followed every American soldier, moving along the supply trail just 180 yards east of his position. For 3 days, Yamamoto and his 11-man sniper team had turned this narrow corridor west of Point Cruz into a killing zone. 14 Americans were dead, each shot delivered with a precision born not from talent alone, but from years of discipline, repetition, and doctrine. Beneath Yamamoto, the Americans trudged forward, carrying crates toward Henderson Field. Their pace was relaxed. Their helmets were low. They believed this area had been cleared. But 11 scopes watched their every step. Yamamoto was 31 years old. He had trained for 27 months under the brutal curriculum of the Imperial Army Sniper School, a place where one mistake was enough to end a career before it began. His team, when combined, represented over 242 months of cumulative training, 20 years of distilled expertise hidden among the coconut groves west of Point Cruz. Each sniper carried the same weapon, Arisaka Type 98 rifle, Type 97 scope, 2.5 times magnification. Effective beyond 400 meters with a trained marksman. Cleaned meticulously every night. Yamamoto's personal rifle had claimed 17 American lives since August 1942. He inspected it like a priest tending to a relic, wiping the bolt, securing the mounts, breathing into the barrel to check for condensation. To Yamamoto, the rifle was not equipment. It was proof of a belief. Individual mastery decides victory, not machines. That belief was shared across the entire Japanese military structure. This was the doctrine that shaped them. 2 years to create one sniper. Patience over firepower. Skill over industrial capability. Quality over quantity. By contrast, most American soldiers received only weeks of basic weapons training. Many had never fired a rifle beyond 200 yards. To Yamamoto, that difference made this conflict predictable. The Americans had factories. Japan had warriors. And warriors, he believed, would triumph. In the 3 days prior, Corporal Davis killed January 19th near the creek. 2 soldiers from L Company shot January 20th. 3 more on January 21st. 14 men. 0 Japanese casualties. Major Tiada himself had visited their previous position to congratulate the unit. Their performance was, as he reported, exemplary, flawless, the model of imperial precision. The coming day would be the same, or so Yamamoto believed. He checked the time. 2,300 hours. Around him, unseen in the darkness. His team members shifted into new positions. Their movement was silent, like the forest breathing. Tomorrow, they would resume their familiar rhythm. Observe. Wait. Take the shot. Disappear. The pattern had held for 5 months. It would hold again, or so he thought. Because at 09:17 the next morning, a sound would break the pattern, a sound that did not belong on Guadalcanal. A sharper crack, a colder tone, a rifle that should never have existed on a battlefield. That single shot would not just kill a sniper, It would dismantle an entire belief system and reveal the truth that Yamamoto had never imagined. For now, perched high in his banyan tree, he felt calm. He felt certain. His team was the best on this island. Their skills were unmatched. Their rifles deadly. Their tactics flawless. And tomorrow, he believed, would be just another successful day. He did not yet know the name John George. He did not yet know the weapon the American carried. He did not yet know the industrial reality that lurked behind that rifle. But tomorrow he would. January 22nd, 1943. 1917. Hours. The morning was quiet, unnervingly quiet. A thin layer of mist clung to the jungle floor. The humidity made every sound heavy, muffled, intimate. Yamamoto scanned the American trail through his 2.5 times scope, noting routine patrols, familiar faces, predictable movements. Then it happened. A rifle cracked, but not like a Garand, not like a Springfield, not like any weapon Yamamoto had ever heard on this island. This sound was too sharp, too clean, too precise. A single violent note slicing through the canopy like a metal whisper. A report came instantly through the radio. Tanaka is down. Corporal Tanaka, the best marksman in the unit. 34 confirmed kills. An elite among elites, found slumped in his treetop hide, shot once through the chest. A perfect kill. From 240 yards, through branches and foliage. Impossible, unless the shooter had optical superiority. Yamamoto's jaw tightened, his pulse steadied. He scanned the horizon, and then he saw it. 320 yards southeast, a ruined bunker his team had scouted the previous day, considered abandoned, exposed, strategically worthless. But someone was there, an American, a lieutenant, judging by the insignia, and he wasn't holding a Garand. The rifle looked wrong. Longer barrel, slimmer profile, full-length wooden stock, and above it, a massive glass tube. A scope, larger than anything the Japanese possessed. He watched the American work the bolt. A bolt-action rifle? Who carries a bolt-action on Guadalcanal? The Americans didn't issue scoped rifles. Here, they barely had a sniper program at all. Yamamoto felt something he hadn't experienced in months. A thin thread of doubt. Another crack. Same unnatural tone. This time the report came with hesitation. Watanabe is down. Watanabe, second best marksman. 41 confirmed kills. Hit instantly. Dead before he fell. 2 of his best men dead in 26 minutes. Not luck, not chance. Systematic elimination. Yamamoto understood immediately. This American was not firing blindly. He was hunting snipers. He was hunting them. 1,008 hours. Gunfire erupted to the west. Garands, multiple rapid shots. 43 seconds later, the radio crackled again. Kobayashi, Fujimoto, Hayashi killed during relocation. A patrol had stumbled upon them while they repositioned. In 51 minutes, Yamamoto's 11-man unit had taken catastrophic losses. Tanaka killed. Watanabe killed. Kobayashi killed. Fujimoto killed. Hayashi killed. 5 dead. 1 wounded. Half the team gone. All because of 1 American rifle and 1 man behind it. Yamamoto studied the bunker again. The American was not moving recklessly. He wasn't firing often. He wasn't revealing himself. He worked like a professional. Patient, calm, methodical. This level of discipline. This level of marksmanship. This level of fieldcraft. It matched Japanese sniper standards. But the rifle, That rifle was something far worse. A civilian hunting rifle. With an oversized American-made scope. This wasn't military. This wasn't standard issue. This wasn't controlled by doctrine or training pipelines. This was industry. This was mass production. This was a glimpse of a national capability Japan could not match. At 10:34 hours, Yamamoto attempted a textbook counter-sniper tactic. He would fire intentionally wide, draw the Americans' attention, and allow Sato to flank and take the kill shot. It was a maneuver practiced hundreds of times at sniper school. Yamamoto fired. The bullet struck a sandbag 18 inches from the American's head. Perfect. The American instantly rolled left, exactly as expected. But instead of looking toward Yamamoto, he fired at Sato. Before Sato even aimed, before Sato even breathed, he already knew where Sato was. 8 seconds later, Sato's voice came through the radio. I'm hit. Shoulder wound. Unable to continue. The American had outmaneuvered the doctrine itself. This wasn't superior skill alone. This was superior vision. Superior optics. A scope that saw movement at distances Japanese equipment could not. When the surviving snipers regrouped, Yamamoto recorded what they now understood. The American scope was not 2.5 times. It was far more powerful, likely 4 times, capable of detecting movement through jungle at 200 plus yards, capable of identifying snipers hidden in treetops, capable of eliminating elite marksmen with single precise shots. And here was the terrifying part. This scope was civilian, a hunting optic, a recreational tool, one that American civilians could buy through a mail-order catalogue. If civilians owned scopes superior to Japanese military issue, how many more Americans like this lieutenant existed? How many rifles like this were already in the Pacific? How many factories produced these tools? Not by the thousands, but by the millions. The truth hit Yamamoto with cold clarity. This wasn't a duel between 2 snipers. This was a duel between 2 economies. Training takes years. Factories take hours. As the war dragged into its later years, the psychological pressure on soldiers on every side deepened in ways few could fully understand. Battle lines shifted. Fortunes rose and collapsed in weeks. But inside the minds of the men fighting, something far more constant was happening. For some, emotions sharpened. Fear, desperation, anger, hope. But for others, emotions did the opposite. They faded. They dimmed. They evaporated into a kind of cold, quiet void. Historians often talk about combat fatigue, shell shock, operational exhaustion. But what most never mention is the emptiness, a type of numbness that made soldiers move and act like shadows of themselves. It didn't happen suddenly. It crept in gradually, like frost crawling across a window. A soldier would wake up one morning, not scared, not brave, just blank. No joy in surviving another night. No sorrow for the friend he lost yesterday. No hatred for the enemy. No real desire for home. Just existence. One repetitive day stacked on another. Commanders noticed it. Medics wrote about it. Even chaplains whispered about the hollow eyes. And yet, on the outside, these men looked completely functional. They fought, they marched, they obeyed orders. But deep inside, they weren't really there. Researchers later discovered something profound. When the brain is overwhelmed by stress, beyond fear, beyond panic, beyond grief, It shuts down non-essential emotional responses to conserve what little energy remains. And in the brutality of World War II, this emotional shutdown became a survival mechanism. A soldier who felt too much broke. A soldier who felt nothing continued moving. But that came with a cost. When the war finally ended, thousands of soldiers returned home carrying a quiet burden. They weren't haunted by nightmares alone. They were haunted by the absence of feeling. Life felt distant. Family felt unfamiliar. Peace felt unreal. Many wrote in letters or diaries that the hardest part of war was not the fighting, but trying to become human again after years of being emotionally frozen. And so, one question remains, a question that historians still reflect on today. What does war take from a man when it takes his ability to feel? Some recovered. Some never did. Some lived the rest of their lives in that silent, numb space created not by choice, but by survival. When the war ended, the world erupted in celebration. Crowds cheering, flags waving, strangers embracing in the streets. But for countless soldiers, there was no celebration inside. The silence after the war felt louder than the explosions that came before it. They had lived for years in a world defined by noise. Rifles cracking, engines roaring, artillery shaking the ground. And now, suddenly, the world was quiet. Too quiet. Families expected joy. Communities expected relief. Nations expected gratitude. But for many veterans, the emotional numbness followed them home like a shadow they couldn't outrun. They sat at kitchen tables, hearing laughter, but feeling none of it. They held their children, but sensed a strange distance. They walked into familiar towns that suddenly felt unfamiliar, as if the war had changed the world's colours. Their loved ones often asked, "Aren't you happy to be home?" But the question was impossible to answer, because they wanted to feel happy, but the emotions simply weren't there anymore. Before the war, everyday moments felt meaningful. A quiet morning, a conversation with a friend, a simple meal. After the war, these things felt too gentle, too fragile, like they belonged to someone else's life. The brain, conditioned to survive chaos, struggled to operate in calm. Some veterans described it as being alive, but not fully living. One of the greatest challenges was reconnecting with themselves. War forced them to become machines. Machines that protected, fought, marched, endured. But now, they had to become human again. Some found their way back slowly, through the love of family, through time, through understanding. Others found comfort in talking with fellow veterans who experienced the same quiet emptiness. But many carried that numbness for the rest of their lives, a hidden scar that no medal could acknowledge. We often celebrate the courage shown in battle, the bravery in the trenches, the sacrifice on the front lines. But there is another kind of courage that history rarely speaks about. The courage to rebuild yourself after war has hollowed you out inside. The courage to feel again after emotions have been locked away for survival. The courage to return to a world that no longer feels familiar. And so when we look back at World War II, at the battles, the victories, the losses, we must also remember the internal war that millions fought long after the shooting stopped. A war against silence. A war against emptiness. A war to rediscover what it means to be alive. Because the story of World War II is not just a story of nations and armies. It is a story of people. People who gave far more than anyone could see. For many veterans, the hardest battle was not fought in the mud, the snow, or the skies. It was fought in the quiet years after. They returned home with uniforms folded, medals stored away, and wounds no one could see. Some tried to talk. Most stayed silent. Because how do you explain something that even you don't fully understand? The world around them moved on. New cars, new music, new headlines, a future racing forward. But inside, they were still stuck between two different versions of themselves. The person they once were, and the person the war had shaped. Healing didn't come in grand gestures. It came in the quiet moments. A child falling asleep in their arms, a familiar smell from a kitchen, a peaceful sunrise that reminded them that life could still be gentle. Some found comfort in rebuilding homes, careers, families, routines. Others found peace in nature, in long walks, fishing, gardening, things that didn't demand words. For many, healing was a slow negotiation between the past and the present. At unexpected moments, a sound, a face, a smell could pull them back to the battlefield. A passing plane overhead, a car backfiring, a flash of lightning in a stormy sky. Memories resurfaced, not as stories, but as sensations, raw, vivid, overwhelming. And yet, even with the weight of those memories, they carried themselves with quiet dignity. They rarely complained. They rarely asked for anything. Because their generation believed that sacrifice was simply part of life. Behind their silence was a belief shared by many veterans around the world. The belief that their suffering should never be passed on to others. They wanted their children to know peace instead of pain. They wanted their families to live without the shadows they carried. They wanted the next generation to learn history so it would never repeat itself. This unspoken responsibility was a burden they chose to carry alone. Today, we live in a world shaped by the endurance of those who returned and by the memory of those who didn't. The freedoms, the stability, the peace many nations enjoy, they were paid for by people who walked through hell and then came home and quietly rebuilt the world. Their courage did not end when the war ended. It continued in the years that followed, in patience, in resilience, in the determination to give their families a future better than their own past. And so, when we think of World War II, we must remember more than battles and dates. We must remember the quiet heroes, the ones who fought the war and then spent a lifetime learning how to live again. Their story is not one of sorrow, but of strength. Not of destruction, but of rebuilding. Not of fear, but of endurance. And that endurance, that quiet, unbreakable human spirit, is the legacy they left behind. As we close this chapter of history, remember this. The stories of World War II are not measured only in battles won or lost, nor in cities liberated or conquered. They are measured in the human cost, in the men who carried courage beyond reason, in the soldiers who held positions long after their bodies were exhausted, and in the generations that inherited a world they rebuilt with their hands and their will. The Pacific Theatre teaches us more than strategy and tactics. It teaches us about the limits of human endurance, about the power of logistics, and the brutal realities of supply lines, and about how industrial capacity can shape the fate of nations. But above all, it teaches us about the individual human spirit. The soldiers who faced impossible odds, who witnessed comrades fall, who survived on courage, determination, and sheer resilience. They are the true measure of the war's story. Every rifle, every stope, every battlefield victory or defeat was only part of the story. The silent moments of fear, of hope, of exhaustion, and of quiet heroism. These are the moments that truly define war, and they are the moments that must not be forgotten. So, as you reflect on these histories, remember the sacrifices that remain unseen, the lessons etched in human endurance, and the legacy of those who returned and those who never did. Because understanding history is not just about knowing what happened. It is about learning why it mattered and why we must honor the courage, resilience, and humanity of those who lived it. If you found this exploration of World War II compelling, consider supporting our channel. Like this video to help more people discover these untold stories. Subscribe to join our community of history enthusiasts. Share your thoughts in the comments. Which moments of courage struck you the most? Together, we can ensure that these stories of endurance, sacrifice, and human spirit remain alive for future generations.